Clubhouse.
Welcome to Decorating the Set from Hollywood to your home with your hosts, Beth Kushnick and Caroline Daly.
Welcome to Decorating the Set from Hollywood to your home. This is Caroline. Hey, Beth.
Hi, Caroline. As the decorator by your side, I'm always interested in helping listeners find the looks from their favorite TV shows and movies. Many years ago now, this week's guest, Cian had the same idea. For example, if you wanted Don Draper's chair from Mad Men, Cian's website, Seen on Set, would point you to 3 different options at 3 different price points for what you wanted to buy.
Cian was a great guest for this week's topic, TV and movies influencing our real-world decor. You talk in the interview about meeting Cian when he interviewed you for his then blog that turned e-commerce site, Seen on Set. Does it ever surprise you how much publicity and exposure you get for your work? Like, this has turned into like this crazy great fan base for things like licensed product lines and home collections.
Well, I have to say that Cian was incredibly astute at understanding the aesthetic of The Good Wife and what I did as a set decorator. He really took a deep dive with his writing into my work, and I think that's what certainly impressed me the most. It's been incredible, all the fan inquiries and the way the business has changed and everything has changed to allow me to have such good communication with fans. This year, I established a website. It's bethkushnick.com, and I've heard from a lot of people with the same kinds of questions, just pictures of their home or their office and questions about sources or what coffee table looks better, this one or that one, and I really enjoy it. So it was initially a surprise, but now I sort of feel like it's an extension of me and extension of my job.
That's wonderful. I mean, it makes so much sense, you know, that people would want to take these things and these characters that they admire and bring their things into their home. You've spent your whole career putting your style and aesthetic into your work, influencing all of your projects. In the spirit of this week's topic, have you ever been inspired or influenced by something you saw on a show or a movie, or have you been working on something on a job that you ended up finding something that you're like, you know what, I'm going to incorporate this into my own style now?
I have been inspired, mostly, I'd say consistently inspired by things that I follow on Instagram, because I seem to be tapping into new sources, new artists, new wallpaper, new products every single day. And that's the thing that fuels my fire, is the hunt for something different. And, you know, I think also sort of everyone I know's doctor on call. You know, like last night, a friend of mine texted me that a friend of hers was looking for a brake front, and I sort of couldn't go to sleep until I found 7 or so selections to send to them. So I think it's all part of my mind constantly going and sourcing and looking for the right thing, or then filing things in my brain that end up coming to fruition for a certain job. And of course, the ironic situation is that, you know, when I'm looking for something really specific for a job, you know, it can be really hard to source or find. And literally the minute that scene shoots, I'm flooded with
it's like buying a red car or something, right?
Yeah,
and all of a sudden that's all you see.
Exactly. So, you know, that's part of the irony of being a set decorator. You know, you search and search and search, and then there it is right in front of you. But I just am on a constant search. It's like sort of an addiction.
I can't imagine the mood board in Beth's head. It must just be like so full of many pins in there. That's funny. Well, unfortunately, we don't have Cian on the set to shop at anymore. But as you talked about in the interview, it was and still is a great idea. If listeners are interested in trying to get looks from shows that they watch, where are the go-to places that you would go to for an item? Like, where would people start this search that you're talking about, this amazing search?
Deciding on a certain topic, everything from furniture to flowers to wallpaper, and starting that search on Instagram, one thing begets another. When you're searching for something that you like, even if you put in specifically in your search, a blue fabric or even more specific beach glass color, or a specific style, one thing leads to another. And then I find, for me, once I start following certain vendors and certain Instagram pages, it's constantly giving me more suggestions. Another way to do it is certainly to search on Pinterest and in publications. Although there are few of them left, there are still online versions, and keep a file of tear sheets and things that inspire you.
That's a terrific suggestion, and we are going to dive in more on this topic with our interview with Cian O'Driscoll.
To help us today understand the larger scope of how TV and movies have influenced home decor in the real world, Cian O'Driscoll is our special guest. Cian was the co-founder of Scene on Set, an early entry business in bringing decor from TV shows and movies to our consumers, which makes him the perfect guest for today's episode. Cian, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Joining us from all the way in Ireland, as people may determine from your accent, but definitely we're getting you
exciting.
here. Yeah, we're getting you on a late night for you, but afternoon for us. So we appreciate you making the time for us.
I appreciate that. No worries, guys.
Beth, let's set the table. How did you first get to meet Cian? I think he's one of your kind of pandemic friends or internet friends that you have.
No, much earlier than that. It dates back to The Good Wife, and he wrote one of the most thorough and fantastic articles on the set decor of The Good Wife, and made it all sound brilliant and wonderful. We became instant friends after that, and we've had a long-standing communication all through my days of The Good Wife and The Good Fight, and his days through Scene on Set.
See, Beth, I met you through Evil, through doing an interview about Evil. Mm-hmm. See, this is how you meet the people in your life.
Yeah,
that's right. And they stay.
And they stay.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that we don't meet in person in today's world, but we've got good communication.
That's it. Me and my little bunker. No friends allowed in here, but I have all of my internet friends.
Cian, tell us about your relationship to TV and film and how your set design blog led to Scene on Set, and tell everyone what Scene on Set was.
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of had that interest in movies and TV shows, even growing up. It was, I guess it depends on your family and your household. And we were always a very kind of art and kind of design and literature based household. And my mom was a very big influence in terms of getting us to read books all the time. And at a very, very young age, was kind of introduced to film. And my older brother, was big into movies, and he subsequently now is a script editor. And, so we kind of had that in the household. And as I was growing up, I always used to kind of be fascinated with the kind of design of sets, and particularly, sci-fi when I was really young was just a big influence on me, and how they designed all of these amazing spaces. And as I kind of matured and grew up, and I worked in the construction industry for a long time, and then I went back to college and I studied to be an architect. And coming out of the back of that, when I was doing my master's degree, I was kind of lecturing on the side as well, and I had a little bit of a design consultant business going. And I started writing this blog just kind of on a Saturday morning with my cup of coffee, and I used to write blogs and articles about the design of movies and how kind of immersive it is and the people behind it. So I really, started to understand that a lot of these people are actually from a kind of design or art background as well. They might have studied theater design, they might have been an architect themselves, and that kind of hooked me in a little bit more. And I wrote a piece for Arc Daily, which at the time was one of the largest kind of architecture websites in the world, and that piece kind of did quite well. And I thought, maybe there's something in this, and I started to kind of expand and do it more and spend more time on it. Quickly, it kind of grew an audience, this blog, and eventually I kind of started noticing that people were reaching out and contacting us looking for certain furniture and decor and items that they had seen. I kind of thought, okay, well, maybe we pivot into this a little bit more, and maybe there's an opportunity to, interact with the set decorators and the people that are dressing the sets and sourcing the material for the sets, and maybe turn this into a more of an e-commerce business and source some of these products for people. And it kind of quickly grew into that direction. And I then kind of had to make the decision, can I actually make this into a proper business? And I took it to a couple of investors, a couple of people in Ireland, and, kind of shopped it around a little bit and, got onto a startup accelerator for a startup business. You guys have many over there. Ireland has a huge kind of community in kind of startups, and there's a lot of government funding to get, small businesses off the ground. So I managed to capture some of that funding, and, I quit my day job as I graduated and quit my day job, didn't go into architecture, started this full time, managed to raise a little bit more investment from some private investors, some more government funding. And I basically hired some developers and marketeers, and we kind of went to work and had a little office space in Dublin at the time. And we just kind of started building this database of decor and furniture from movies and TV shows. And then with that, as we kind of, you and I came to meet, was, there was also this layer of kind of content and, appreciation, because we didn't want it just to be a total kind of e-commerce site, because its original form wasn't that. It was much more about, writing about these beautiful, amazing designs that people sometimes take for granted on their television set every evening, right? And so I started writing articles about certain shows and certain things, and even certain pieces of furniture, or people used to always reach out to us wondering, what's the painting hanging in Ex Machina, for instance, the girl in the white dress, and people wanted to know what these things were. And then, you and I kind of, met over the internet way back when. I think it was like 2013, 14 maybe. Yeah, and I wanted to do a piece on The Good Wife, and
you captured every part of me. I felt like you really understood the depth of, what we were trying to do, and the fact that we had the first home decor license in TV history.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, and it really was. And I remember speaking to you for the first time. We had talked a bit over email, and then we chatted on the phone a couple of times, and it really was that kind of element of, okay, because you at the time had become quite famous in the sense that in terms of, not many set decorators had become, front of house almost, right? They hadn't, had articles written about them. They hadn't had their own line. So you had kind of broken the fourth wall, let's call it, of coming from behind the scenes to front of the camera. And I thought that was very interesting also. And there's an element, I think now, maybe, even when, I don't know how long ago was it, the Oscars started including the set decorator as part of the Production Design Academy. I think it was kind of a part of the industry that wasn't really well known or celebrated, maybe like 10, 15, 20 years ago. Yeah. And I think now people like yourself kind of broke that barrier a little bit, and I found that quite an interesting take on the whole thing. So yeah, and then of course the design of The Good Wife had kind of permeated popular culture as well. And I remember, maybe I'm mistaken, now maybe you can correct me, but I think, one of the wine glasses, I think it was a Crate and Barrel wine glass, and I remember I reached out to somebody in Crate and Barrel, and they were able to tell when a certain episode aired that this wine glass would, people would come looking for this wine glass because it was on, the episode the evening before, right? So, and that just kind of tells you that, sometimes these shows or movies, particularly TV shows, I guess, because you're a little bit more invested and connected to them, and they're in your living room every evening, every week, right? So you kind of notice things, and you start going, oh, I like, certain items in the background, or so I think that just kind of took it to a whole kind of another level, and at that point I really knew we were onto something. I really knew that we'd kind of touched the pulse of something, and that was really the kind of the early days, the start of it, and it kind of went on from there for the next kind of 5 years of my life.
I mean, that's the perfect segue, though, because you're watching it, you're writing your blog, you're the reporter on the ground, really taking this in. But Beth, you're working on the show. People who have listened to the podcast over the years know that you're the first, licensed decor. You set up the first licensed decor from a show. But tell us a little bit about what that experience is like in the moment. How did you know it was time? What was it like getting together with Mitchell Gold and Bob Williams to launch the Good Wife and then later the Good Fight collections? And just go behind the scenes on that a little bit, because it was groundbreaking and still not nearly as common as maybe people even think it might be.
Right. It actually still stands really as the only home decor license. It was an opportunity given to me by really the fans, because what was happening at the time was we were getting so much fan mail at CBS, and in those days, I think I might have said this before, it was being inspected for anthrax. I mean, it was really something that was unexpected. Everybody wanted to know about Alicia's apartment and the furnishings, and I was asked to think about what might be an appropriate license. They didn't want to do things like a mouse pad or a mug, although they did those, but they wanted something more substantial. And at that point, I put together a document of all my most regularly used vendors. I'd say, through the help of Eloise Goldman, who was then working for Mitchell, who was really he is open-minded and really creative, and collaborating on the designs with Bob. Mitchell came and took a tour of my set out in Brooklyn and my shop, and he saw so many things and so many items, and I think that's what cinched it. He said, okay, let's do this. They took off with a blog and the licensed product, and then I got deals for licensed product with IMAX Worldwide Home and with Interlude Home, with Horchow. It really hit at a time when everyone wanted a piece. They could have larger pieces like the furniture. We created the whole concept of get the good look of the Good Wife. Really, the fans drove it. And also the furniture itself in the Mitchell Gold and Bob Williams line was so well made that even if you didn't want the exact sofa in Alicia's living room, you wanted that sofa in another fabric. Then I would go back to them and, based on the script, like there was one season when, it's scripted that Kalinda is sitting with a gun facing the door.
As we all do from time to time.
Yeah, absolutely. In an oversized chair. And what better chair to give her than, a white leather wingback chair. The characters informed our designs, and we tried each year of the license to add to the collection, and we had a pretty healthy collection. By the time it came to the end of the good fight, I mean, we really could furnish your whole house.
I mean, a collection you can still go see up on Mitchell Gold and Bob Williams' website. It's still there, and you can still check it out.
It's still out there in the world. My IMAX collection is still, pieces here and there or on Amazon or Wayfair. And I think it did really change the concept of set decorator and how people could interact with a set decorator.
Let's talk about the back home collection though for a second, because this was then your personal line of decor. I'm curious how your experience in setting up the Good Wife collection based on the show influenced, good or bad, or just changed what did you take away from that helped you when you launched your own personal back home collection line?
Well, they were really different experiences because Mitchell Gold and Bob Williams manufactures all their furniture in the United States. And that's what made this collection possible because, turnaround time in TV shows is non-existent. Right. And the way in which we could do all of this is that the furnishings were available in the United States. That factory, broke their backs to give us what we needed in time to feature on the set. For my personal collection, it was made overseas, and I learned so much about a whole other aspect of the business. And what we really tried to do was, we would call them my go-to pieces from set, meaning that they were versatile enough that they could be used in like all different environments. So the pieces were, I don't know, what you would call transitional. So they could be in a modern setting or, in a little more traditional setting, but they still looked appropriate. And a lot of it was office design really wasn't, as popular or as different looking as we achieved it on The Good Wife. It was the traditional tufted leather sofa. We really pushed the envelope with the office design. And a lot of the characters were women, and, that informed the scale of pieces and the sizes and color and everything.
So you're working in the 2010s, you're working on The Good Wife, then you're working on The Good Fight. Cian, you're watching this, you're running your blog, you're starting to work on Cian on set. This e-commerce develops you're both on this parallel track moving towards the same idea of people want to get the look into their home. Now, TV's been around for 70 years at this point. From each of you, what do you think it was that led to this moment? Both of you kind of arriving at the same idea at the same time, and obviously there was a market for it. Why then? Why at that point did it develop? What led to people actually not only really wanting to get the look from their shows and their films, but actually being able to do it?
I think there was a number of elements, right, that the kind of stars aligned at this point. But I think one of the key ones was television kind of had become quite sophisticated, right? And not to say that television wasn't prior to that, right? But in terms of the shows and the level of kind of quality and detail that, like someone like Beth working, at the top of her game on a, hugely popular global TV show, it had that kind of influence. And I think in that period of the 2010s, you started to see the kind of breakthrough of certain shows like Mad Men. And then it became, you saw kind of writings and pieces in this, in major publications, everything from like the New York Times to actually design magazines and blogs and things like that spoke about this. And I think it kind of coincided with a huge growth in kind of interiors at the same time. And I think how people decorated their homes or the type of furniture that they sought, I think ultimately change. And if you think as well during this period, so in the kind of lead up to that, it was kind of like coming out the back of a recession again, and people started to spend a little bit more money again. And so I think kind of by 2012, 2014 onwards, the kind of online furniture industry, and I did a lot of research into this at the time because I was, having to develop, business plans and talk to investors, and, we had to have a strategy in place in terms of the economic viability of what we were putting forward and trying to develop. So there was a whole element of that as well. I don't know if you would agree, Beth, but I think certainly
Yes.
TV itself changed, right? And the kind of maybe even the investment in the sets and the decor, and they really did want it to be a very kind of cutting edge at the time, I think. And obviously different TV shows had a different need or a different requirement, but I think some of those very, very popular TV shows at the time broke through and had that element of it kind of influenced into kind of popular culture. It influenced into the kind of the design world, and people of a design background started taking notice. And you did see a lot more, articles and coverage of the type of, because there was a point where it used to be fashion only, right? And it was like, what, Sophia Loren was wearing or whatever it might have. That's a long time ago. But, equally right the way up, it was, you could find kind of fashion, get the look, quite easily. But there was nothing really there from the kind of the decor and design standpoint, and we really felt that there was something in there. And I remember speaking to Beth at the time, and we really spoke about, if you think about particularly like, let's say, Alicia's apartment or some of these sets, they're on screen, and some of this furniture is on screen more than the actors are, right? And it's like, it has more screen time. And a lot of these companies then, I remember, our most searched for item on our site at the time, like when we were at our height, was the office chair from Billions, right? The TV show Billions. And this office chair was at the time was like $2,500 for this office chair. We obviously had a link to that chair, but we also had, here's a couple of alternatives that look the same, but it's a lot cheaper. You can get it on Wayfair or wherever it might be. And we really felt that was a kind of a model that we'd pivot into was, here's the real product, here's the designers and the manufacturers and the real people who built and designed this chair, but also here's a kind of cheaper alternative if you're not going to spend $2,500 on a chair. That kind of element of, people really wanted to see, or find out, oh God, we're watching this show every Tuesday night, and I love his office. I love the chair he sits in, when he's having arguments with his coworker, whatever it might be. And, that then just kind of, I think people took notice a little bit more of those kind of elements, and it moved beyond fashion, and those elements kind of combined at the same time, and it made for a kind of an interesting period in that kind of relationship between the viewer and the amazing sets that were put in front of us of an evening when we sat down with a glass of wine, and we were and these shows were beautifully acted and very well written and produced, in a way that, people always say that Sopranos changed TV, and, there's tons of documentaries that you can watch that pivot in television. And I think all of that kind of fed into that period of the noughties, and I think we still see it today, right? There's still a lot of, beautifully designed TV shows out there. And I think just that time, that period, just saw that transition of bringing the audience a little bit closer to that level of design and decor, I think.
Yeah, I think it was definitely that. And it was the onset of technology and, going from getting fan letters delivered to CBS to, setting up a blog and creating a way in which they could contact me directly. Every part of technology at that point, more shopping that took place online, looking at things that were more accessible online. This whole concept was started then of sort of a high-low, where you see something that you want and then you might be able to imitate it somewhere else. The internet changed completely my position as someone who was, never in front of the scenes and always behind the scenes, everyone being able to get in touch with me. And another part that was fascinating was from the office decor standpoint. In those early days, I was being contacted by more men than women who, wanted my advice and services for their office. That's sort of rare when you think about who's looking at decor, not to typecast anybody, but it made it a much more universal thing. These shows that, like Mad Men, like Billions, like Good Wife, they had a really split demographic audience. It was a much huger audience than, anything that came before it.
TV budgets, though, also must play a role in it, right? Because Beth, you specifically, I think back to a movie like Reversal of Fortune that you worked on, which had just, I even remember seeing it, and I was young. I was a teenager when I saw it, and I'm thinking, this is just max lux, just lush furnishings that I would want to live in. I was 15, at the time, and it was like a pipe dream. But then, or even like Private Parts, which was irreverent, but it was cool. It was great mid 90s, cool for what like a young hip person would want. You didn't see that really in TV shows. Maybe you saw like a fun Friends mug or like Central Perk kind of thing, but you didn't see something that you really wanted to like throw your money at. You get to the mid 2000s and you have, like you said, Mad Men, you have The Good Wife, where you finally can see those big budget movie lush furnishings every week. It becomes high end every single week over and over again in your eyeballs. I think it also must make it much more attractive.
It also was a concept of, you think that I have an incredible budget, but in reality, I have
the genius out there working, picking, finding these little gems. Yeah.
Well, it was really funny because also I was doing network television then. It was 22 episodes, so I would always shove the additional money spent on the next episode. But once I got to episode 20 of the season, I had to like really tighten my belt, and hope the script was going to take place in like one office. But the interesting thing about it is that in those days, the fan interaction was such that they challenged me. I mean, I got a lot of blowback saying you're not giving the source, because my blog was that I gave the real sources. I was taking so many questions, and I put together 5 or 10 questions a week, and I just gave the honest sources. Like, that faucet came from a cheap big box store, and no one believed me. And then they were getting so outraged because they could get in touch with me that, I was like arguing with people and saying, hey, you work with my budget.
Right.
So
right.
It was, I think, also because of the interaction, it brought it all up to what we called aspirational, and yet it was totally attainable.
I want to talk about a specific item that we see come up over and over again when people are trying to get the look. I want to talk about color and paint specifically. Anyone who's listened to Decorating the Set knows Alicia's bedroom paint color was always a hot button issue for you during your time, and what color it was, the exact tint. But Pantone just recently launched the marvelous Mrs. Maisel custom color palette. They designed an entire palette specific to that show that are people going crazy over because they want that retro 60s look. Guys, why do you think paint and color is such a popular expression for fans to try and get the looks of their favorite characters? Maybe even more than a chair or a couch. It's the paint, it's that color that draws them in so often.
Well, it's so affordable. No one's making a big mistake if you paint your bedroom Alicia's bedroom color, which is Beach Glass by Benjamin Moore. It's really something that can inform the look of the whole room. And it did. The linens went with it, and the lighting and the furnishings, and everything was a takeoff on that color, which was my bedroom color in my own room. It worked, and it was something that was really pleasing to a lot of people. I answered that question thousands of times, and I think it gives everyone a starting point that maybe they can't necessarily afford the furniture, but they can get the look in a cheaper way.
What do you think, Cian? What is it about color that draws people to objects? And especially, I mean, you have firsthand knowledge of people looking to you to hook them up with certain items.
Yeah, I think to Beth's point, I think from a kind of an ease of use and a low cost approach, and if you don't like it, if it doesn't work, you can paint over it. Color, even as a whole, I remember thinking back to at the time we had a lot of products from Suits, the TV show. I think it ran for about like 7 or 8 years. It was more popular in North America than it was in Europe, but one office was a kind of a really kind of rich blue, and the other office was a mute, like the two main characters was a kind of a muted, I think almost like a creamy kind of, and it was meant to kind of reflect their contrasting personalities, right? And then equally to that, they had, art hanging on certain walls will have a certain pop, given the color and the influence. So I've seen people not even notice a piece of art, and by season 3 they've repainted the wall a different color, and all of a sudden, whoa, what's that piece of art? I've never noticed it before. So I think it has an immense influence, and even just color as a whole. I mean, all you look at any Wes Anderson movie, right? It's color is the kind of first thing that you might notice, and it can change the mood of a scene instantaneously. So I think from a kind of an acquisition perspective, from a viewer or a customer, it's a quick way to maybe get the starting point from which you're going to build or dress your room, be it your bedroom or your living room, whatever it might be. I think that the paint and the color of your walls ultimately has a huge influence on the type of art you might hang, or the furniture, or the carpet, or the hardwood floors, or whatever.
It's a mood creator, it just sets the tone.
Yeah. It's your canvas by which you create your mood board that, of your eclectic life of whatever way you're going to do it. So, and I didn't know that they developed that paint, which I think is a fabulous idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of, because it's Maisel's final season. Everyone is chipping in right now. There's there's a specific Tupperware line right now to get that retro 60s look in the same kind of colors as the Pantone palette.
Well, that leads us to something interesting, which is, since we did large pieces of furniture, and really since my line of go-to smaller items, there has been this, onslaught of smaller items. I think economically people realize that, maybe someone's not going to make a big investment. They could make a smaller investment, Tupperware or a deck of cards, or, anything that's taken that's available from their favorite show. And there was also an element when we had designed the line for CBS of this concept of gift giving to your favorite fan. A lot of the interaction I have with people they want to know about a certain piece of art I have on set because they want to give it as a gift to their husband or wife. So, it was seen as another way to take something that someone enjoys and give to them based on it. In researching this episode, we saw wide gaps in affordability and quality of products seen on TV and film. Cian, do you have any advice or tips or tricks on how shoppers can avoid knockoff items and also avoid overpaying for items in their quest to get a look?
It's a good question, and it's a difficult one, because you obviously on a lot of TV shows and sets, they might have an Eames lounge chair, for instance, right? If you're going to buy the official Eames lounge chair, it's $12,500, right? But you can buy a knockoff. It's probably made in China or somewhere like that, and you're taking away from that that original design. But ultimately, one thing that we found was the best approach really was to try and offer, an alternative, right? So a cheaper alternative of something that gives you that kind of mid-century modern feel and look, is a beautiful piece, but is more affordable. And I think, that's ultimately, as we developed within the business at the time, we started quickly realizing that that's something we had to do because, there was a mix, as you said, Beth, earlier. People would look for a product and it was just sourced in a prop house in some back alley in Los Angeles, right? And we couldn't find it, we couldn't source it. But then, the kind of high ticket items, like the chair from Billions or whatever it might be, these were very, very expensive. So we then had to spend a whole lot of time trying to research kind of other alternatives to shop the look, in inverted commas, right? I think people can do that. I think it's probably a great kind of alternative, and you can, once you start going down those kind of rabbit holes, you start discovering similar types of pieces or furniture or those kind of maybe even low cost alternatives that give you a certain look, but I think it's worth kind of investigating. And it is a little bit of, you have to kind of pick through a lot of, stuff to find what you want. There's no quick fix or easy way around that. You need to, see the chair that you like or the look that you like. And the more you kind of start searching for it, you'll start, finding little alternatives or, I didn't think of this chair. And this is, it might not be, a 1950s, California mid-century, beautiful piece, but it gives you that look and feel for half the price. And I think it does come to that. You really need to put in the work and get out there and start looking and investigating at different alternatives. And that's where Cian on Set kind of fit at the time was, we could source and connect you with the real source of this product or this piece. But ultimately, here's 2 or 3 alternatives at a kind of a low end entry level, kind of mid range, and then the high range. And that's kind of the approach that we took, because I think ultimately, be it a customer or a viewer, whoever a reader, I think they appreciate that a little bit more, that you're taking the time to kind of do that. There's no kind of easy way around that. We actually had to go out and find all these alternatives and use our own kind of...
Be a set decorator.
Exactly. Use my own eye, right? Going, I don't want to put that forward because I don't really, it's not that nice. It's not, I don't think it's well made. For that price, it's going to be kind of flimsy or cheap, and I don't want to, give that as an option to somebody. So we really put a lot of time into researching and trying to find a good alternative for people. But there was no, we just had to kind of go and do that kind of long donkey work and do it and put together we had at the time, at the peak, and we still have the database actually, and somebody had approached us about the database about a year ago. We had tens of thousands of kind of products and pieces of furniture and decor, everything from like wine glasses to chairs to couches to chandeliers, and the links to the where you could buy it or the manufacturer. And we still have that database, and there was a lot of work that went into kind of gathering all that information together. And but I think at the time the readers and the audience kind of did appreciate that we were giving you that key source and that true item, but we were also giving you 2 or 3 alternatives.
Also, this podcast has given in that way that we've talked about all different topics of decor, and maybe it isn't the exact chair, but you find a chair that has the same frame shape, and then you recover the chair. Or maybe it's the concept of luxe fabrics, and you find some lower price velvet, or you can take the concepts that are being put forward in any of these terms, and just use the TV show or movie as inspiration and build off that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Finding your price point is having a budget and knowing what you want to spend and maybe not being lured into spending too much, I think is a good segue to my next question, because I was going down rabbit holes of items that I liked, and all of a sudden I had, a shopping cart full of things. I was like, I don't actually need all of these things. I don't want my house necessarily looking like a set, verbatim. So is it possible to go too far in being influenced by what we see? How do we find the blend of our our personal style with what we like from a TV show, but not necessarily lose ourselves. Beth, I know you have a very good bent on including your style into either what a TV show or a character requires, or even for your private clients, bringing a little bit of your style to those private clients so that you're not losing yourself in it completely. How should people at home avoid doing that?
I think just, stick to what you like. And if you're influenced, by a specific show or a style or a certain period, like we said, try it in small doses. Like try the paint color, try the new chair. You don't have to change everything in the living room. Try it in a piece of art. There are ways that are subtle that, like a piece of art, you look at it and it will always remind you of that show that you have an affinity towards. But someone else can come and look at it and not realize that it was from your favorite show. I look at it as just kind of special possessions that people take with them through their years, through their different homes. It becomes a part of their style, but it doesn't change everything. I think it's so important to live in a space that reflects you and what your character is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree completely. And I mean, I don't think, from my perspective, somebody's not going to rebuild their entire living room to look like their favorite show or anything. But it's
that's my worry. One day I wake up and my kitchen looks like the Golden Girls kitchen. I'm sitting there eating cheesecake. I don't want. I love the Golden Girls, but I don't want to live in their house.
It's possible because an auction house is soon to be having the auction of the entire All in the Family set, and the Cheers bar, and you could buy the whole thing. But no, we don't want you to do that.
Yeah, and I think it is those influences, and I mean, there's things that I remember at the time. It was I think it might have been the movie of Sex and the City, but Carrie had a certain tile in her kitchen, and we were inundated with emails. People going, "Where did you get this tile?" We eventually found it for people, right? But we couldn't sell you the tile. You have to go to your local tile merchant and put in an order, and so it was like that. But people just loved that little influence, and I don't think they were going to fit out their entire kitchen the way Carrie had her kitchen, right? But they just had that little kind of influence. It was a beautiful blue and it had a certain kind of depth to it. So I think that ultimately, it's like anything. It's like same with, I guess, with fashion or art or music. You'll have, these subtle kind of influences and you take what you need from it, right? And my taste through the years and even through, being educated in design. So, prior to studying architecture, my tastes were completely different when I came out the other end of it, right? So, and even now today, my tastes are much more kind of eclectic, and I still have a deep love of kind of American design from the mid-century and things like that. And, Mies van der Rohe and Eames, and, they have huge influence on me. But I also kind of match that up with IKEA, right? And, whatever I can kind of afford. And I do try to do an element of, like Beth kind of mentioned, try to get that look from something that's kind of cheaper. And, even if you have to kind of upcycle something or change the, I'll buy an IKEA dresser and I'll take off the handles that they have and I'll put different, something like that, right?
Love that.
So I think it's about finding, and for us it was, no one ever really wanted everything from a set. They wanted, Don Draper's whiskey tumblers, right? Or
there were the iconic pieces.
The iconic, yeah. And it was those, and to Beth's point earlier about, it makes for a great gift or something like that. And I think those elements and art specifically as well played a huge kind of influence. And I think you just take what you, and my experience of, running the business for 5-6 years, it really was, that's what people were coming to us looking for, or they were the items that we sold the most of, was those kind of little touch points, little kind of dress, like a lamp or, a whiskey tumbler tumbler, a wine glass, or a reprint of a famous painting that you could get, a poster print that you could put in a beautiful frame yourself and get that kind of look. That was ultimately, I think, what people were seeking out the most.
E-commerce technology was a big part of the idea behind Cian on Set. And you continue today to be an e-commerce expert. What do you see as the next big thing coming to us e-commerce wise?
Well, I think, there's a lot, and e-commerce has boomed, particularly since the pandemic as well, given that, everybody had to kind of order stuff from home, right? And unfortunately, in some industries, some part of the industries, you're seeing the kind of the net effect of that now, that, the likes of Amazon have had to kind of lay off tens of thousands of people because they'd such a growth period during kind of COVID and during the pandemic. But coming out of the back of that now, I think it's starting to kind of settle and reshape. I think actually, in terms of long-term future and, kind of linking to what we're talking about here today, I actually believe that Cian on Set was maybe a couple of years too early, right? I think that we will ultimately, I think ultimately it's going that way. I think there'll be, particularly with all the kind of streaming services, they're going to start slowly integrating more shopping into that as well, so that you can, if you're on, Paramount Plus or Netflix, that you'll have the ability to be able to with the click of your remote, purchase certain things via your TV and ultimately from the TV show. And I think, I know that there's some companies out there at the kind of higher end aspect of the technology side of this have been developing a lot of applications that you're going to see kind of come into your living room, that you're not even going to have to get out your laptop anymore. You can just, order straight away from your TV, right? So I think there's going to be a movement in that direction. I think e-commerce as a whole, and I work now for a kind of a major tech multinational, but at its very core is, and I say this to some of my team, is that it's customer journey, right? It's you got to think of who you're kind of trying to sell a product to and why they want. And when you think back to Don Draper, and it's that kind of that need and want, it's to be included in something, it's to be part of something, whether that's the acquisition of a piece of furniture or a new pair of trainers or whatever it might be. I think ultimately, if you never lose sight of that customer and why they're coming here and what they're looking for, whether you're selling t-shirts or whether you're selling computers or whether you're selling furniture from a movie or TV show, ultimately that you got to approach it in the same way. It's going to move a little bit more towards that kind of easier way of purchasing. And I think like I mentioned, that Cian on Set being a little bit too early, I think the technology is going to be quickly kind of rolled out across all of these platforms in the next maybe 10 years, and at a click of a button you're going to be able to buy whatever you want from a movie or TV show. And e-commerce is booming, and I think a lot of that is just driven by people wanting convenience and they want to be able to now you can do anything you want from your phone in terms of purchasing. But I think ultimately the danger is you kind of lose sight of who you're selling to and your customer. And I think you got to be careful of that, I think, in this time. And I think if you keep that rooted in whatever you do, whether you're kind of have an online business or not, I guess, but primarily in an online business, you got to kind of keep that at its core.
Yeah. Know your audience for everything.
Yeah.
Cian, we've kept you pretty long today, and I appreciate your time. Well, first, let me thank you for taking the time to talk to us. This is a great topic and discussion. The last question I have for you is, with the experience you gained from Cian on Set and everything you went through in that startup process, and in the years since, thinking back on it, reflecting it, and still being in the e-commerce industry, what is the single best piece of advice you think you could give another entrepreneur that maybe was looking to launch a startup?
Being an entrepreneur, launching your own business can be a very lonely existence, right? Because even your family and friends don't really know what it's like. And it's a very stressful period, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And anybody that started a small business, whether it's a small mom and pop shop or an online business or whatever it is, it's a tough grind that you have to do. But I would say this, that if you have an idea and you kind of believe in it. And I know this is a little bit cliched, but take that leap, okay? Because, I'm still standing. I, took my knocks, and it was a very, very tough period. We had, raised, a couple of rounds of investment, and we were doing quite well. And we always felt like that we were right on the cusp of something, right? And we were getting introduced to all the right people. And I think Beth can remember this, like everybody, when you brought up the idea to, like, they loved it. They were like, oh my God, this is a great idea, right? But ultimately I think,
it's still a good idea. Not for nothing. It's still a good idea.
It was before its time. It was cutting edge,
yeah.
And it lived at a time when, everyone wasn't exactly ready for it. But you see, how genius you are. It's standing the test of time. I mean, it's continuing.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think we kind of fell into a trap that a lot of startups, particularly tech or online startups, is that you're kind of chasing the next. So you need money to make money, right? And you're chasing the investment, but also you're trying to generate revenue to keep the cash flow going. And if you're not doing one or the other, eventually you kind of run out of steam, and you run out of that bandwidth that you have in terms of, particularly in an e-commerce business. Investing in an e-commerce business is hard, because people they want to see that great return really, really early. But we kind of needed money to kind of reach another level, to kind of take it up a notch, and we were kind of just constantly chasing that. And I think looking back, I would have maybe stripped it back a little bit and just really, really focused on delivering cheaper alternative product earlier. I think we did that maybe 2-3 years into it, and we realized then that that's what we should have done maybe from the start. So that was a key
market.
Yeah, exactly. More kind of mass, and have that kind of, you need your kind of like bread and butter products, right? That could, like your little whiskey tumblers, that'll just keep the cash coming in at a low level, that'll keep the lights on. And I think a little bit more of that was maybe a good learning. But I think ultimately, kind of looking back, and I think it's different in the US than it is here in Ireland. I know we're kind of coming up on time, but I mean, I think in the US, right, you start a business, and this is a little bit anecdotal, but nonetheless, hear me out, right? In the US, if you start a business, it's kind of, and even if you fail, it's kind of good for you. You did that, like you took your lumps, and, go again, and it's very rewarding. Whereas here, it's getting better, but there's a little bit of a kind of, like, I was a little bit embarrassed, when it all kind of failed. And I had to kind of lay people off, and then, you'd meet people like, oh, how's that business going? And you're like, oh, it did, not so well, and it's kind of that, looking back. And there was a time that I was like devastated by it all, right? And it really did kind of hurt me, but now looking back, I'm like really, really proud of it. And it was something, even my mother, a couple of years later, after it had all kind of wrapped, and she was like, write down on paper all of the things that you achieved with Cian on Set. I mean, I was like speaking at seminars all over Europe, and we won, loads of different awards. And, Google, we were in Google's Adopt a Startup. Microsoft, we won a competition with Microsoft, and they, all of our stack was like $300,000 worth of Microsoft, tools and solutions that we could use. And, we were, in major interviews and major publications globally and stuff like that. We were like, starting to talk to people at Netflix. It was really, really good stuff. And it was only afterwards, when I kind of put all that stuff down on paper, that I said, oh yeah, we actually did some things, we kind of, that was, there's a lot of boxes ticked there. And now even, working on the other side, coming out and being in a major corporation, I think the guys there, I know my manager or my boss, he always still says to this day, he'd never seen a resume like my resume. It was just kind of all over the place, but it was all of these things that he was kind of terrified to try himself. And he kind of saw that as a very unusual but brilliant kind of opportunity for him to hire someone like that, right? And
That's great.
and and I wasn't, and I said it to him, I'm like, I'm not a yes man, I'm not a corporate person. I've never worked in a big corporate. And he's like, that's why I'm hiring you, right? Because you've done all these things, and you're a little bit different than someone that's come from like KPMG, and he's gone to Microsoft, and now he's with Facebook, and he's coming to Google, and you're a little bit different. And I think that ultimately is probably the biggest legacy in me. But then also, meeting people like Beth along the way, who was a real kind of advocate of mine and what we were doing. And And that always kind of stays with me as well, Beth. It's something I always really do appreciate, and you were always a big supporter of us. And yeah, so I think looking back, I'm quite proud, and for anybody else that, even if it doesn't work out, I think it's always worth kind of taking that chance.
It's such a good lesson.
Yeah,
it's such a good lesson. I am so proud of you, and I'm glad now you can be one of decorating the set from Hollywood to your home. You can be one of our international ambassadors. We always love to have people from different countries telling us what's up. And it's a cutting edge concept that you played a major part in.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so glad to have a chance to talk to you again.
I appreciate it. Thanks as always, Beth. I really do appreciate you guys having me on and giving me the time to tell my story, my little dent in the world, and I thank you for that.
Cian, you were fantastic. I hope if you ever dip your toe back in, you come back and share your journey with us. You've been a delight. Everyone, Cian O'Driscoll, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I just want to thank Cian for taking the time to speak with us all the way from Cork, Ireland, another one of our international ambassadors. Scheduling across time zones can be a challenge, and we appreciate Cian working with us to make the interview happen.
That's going to do it for this episode, you guys. Thanks so much for listening. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Decorating the Set from Hollywood to Your Home at Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please leave a 5-star review. It helps a lot in promotion of the show. 5 stars, people. Thanks so much for listening.
Decorating the Set from Hollywood to Your Home is an original Pod Clubhouse production. Recorded, edited, and produced at Pod Clubhouse Studios. For more information, please visit us online at podclubhouse.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Decorating the Set at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.